So welcome to our next panel titled Texas Leading in Industry 4.0. This is going to be a fun conversation. I want to explain what Industry 4.0 is. It's a term that's used for what we call the fourth industrial revolution, which is the ongoing automation of traditional manufacturing using smart technology, artificial intelligence, 5G or now 6G networking, machine learning, the Internet of Things, to increase automation and production, smart machines that can act without humans intervening. Autonomous vehicles are an example. To discuss this topic today, I have the pleasure of being with Norman Anderson, a global infrastructure expert and the author of his latest publication, Vision, Our Strategic Infrastructure Roadmap Forward. Thank you for being here, Norman.
Thanks. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. I'm also joined by Colonel Ross Guieb, the former Executive Officer to the Commanding General of the Army Futures Command and currently the Executive Director of the George H.W. Bush Combat Development Complex at Texas A&M University. Ross, it's great to have you here as well.
It's great to see you. Thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. So, Norman, I got the first questions for you. Today, at today's summit, we talked a lot about how industry is embracing this automation. But in your book, you have an interesting statement that says, infrastructure is our first order priority when it comes to our state and our nation. Are we falling behind on infrastructure as a nation?
Well, I think we're not thinking about it right. So we're falling behind for sure, but we're not thinking about it right, because what we're really talking about, when you talk about Industry 4.0 and the new Industrial Revolution, we're really talking about the digitization and electrification of our infrastructure, and infrastructure becomes the brains of our economy. It really becomes absolutely critical. And we're not spending enough time on it. We're not bringing enough private investment into infrastructure, and we're not allowing the kind of innovation that we have to see, because we got to move a lot faster. You know, we were talking to the Colonel last night. It takes 8.5 years just to get a highway approved in the U.S., so we have to change a few things around.
So what do we need to do?
We need to do a lot. Well, one of the things we need to do is do a little bit more, put a little more Texas attitude in Washington. I think that would be helpful, because you guys get things done.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, and you don't wait for permission to get things done. You know, one of the things that we see, and the point I try to point out in my book, think about it, if it takes that long to get a highway approved, that means the highways in the country aren't going to be approved until 2030. And by 2030, we see that we're going to have something like 50 billion sensors, IoT devices on buildings around the U.S. Our highways are simply going to be digital ecosystems, and that's going to be absolutely critical for us to work and to be successful. It's going to be almost like water, where you don't need it all the time, but you need access to it, and that'll allow you to create businesses, be innovative, have a good life. We're not thinking like that. There's a huge amount of urgency that should be driving our thought.
Well, Colonel Guieb, there's a lot of innovation and thought going on at Texas A&M University.
Yeah, I was speaking to Norman about this, and I appreciate your comment about Texas and really moving the needle. I'll just give you an example. So at Texas A&M on the Rellis campus, it's 2,300 acres. We brokered a deal 2 years ago between Texas A&M University System and TEAS, and also with DoD through Army Futures Command. In less than 2 years, we delivered a state-of-the-art building, and we moved into it. This is less than 2 years. There was, it is something that in federal government we would know. We probably couldn't broker the first meeting in 2 years, let alone move into the new building. And we're also building some really exquisite infrastructure there, a 1 kilometer long integrated hypersonics test range, largest, most instrumented in the United States. So that'll come on in another year. And then a 300-acre outdoor lab with no roof, with 3 5G networks. I mean, it'll be part of the crown jewel of what we do here in Texas as far as national security research. So we're happy. It was a good discussion last night, because I realized the uphill battle that you're fighting in D.C. So we're fighting, right?
It's really interesting.
Really and the role of the universities, I mean, plays huge. I mean, you mentioned a lot in this book. It's government, universities, and the private sector.
Well, and I think the other thing that's really interesting, and it's really interesting to listen to the Colonel, is that infrastructure has always been a sort of a secondary thing, right? It's cement, it's steel, it's dumb. It's the backbone for our productivity, for our mobility, that kind of thing. Now it's a first order priority. It's going to operate at the same level as critical national security. Unbelievably important. And when we think about infrastructure, we think about it in national security terms because it's a 30 to 40 year decision that you're making. When you make an investment right now, needs to last and serve us for 30 to 40 years. And if you think about the other piece of it, which is the digitization and electrification of our infrastructure, you're going to upgrade that infrastructure with new software every year or every 3 months. So you've got to think very differently about what we're doing.
Well, in this country, it seems like we think more in 2, 3 to 5 years, and other countries are looking way, way, way ahead.
Well, look, it's a challenge too. I don't want to, because we all live in a democracy, and what's happened is that it used to be an infrastructure project was a public works project, and you can start it and finish it in a congressional term. Now there's zero chance of even getting approval in a congressional term. So we need new institutions to think through strategically what we need to build, and we need some kind of continuity, just like you have in the military, between administrations. Otherwise, we're not going to get anything done.
And Colonel Guieb, when you and I first met, when you were with the Futures Command, you had mentioned a word about momentum. And it just seems like in Texas, things move quickly.
I think really the vision's important, but unless you put action and resources against the vision, it's just another great idea, right? And I think that's what Texas is about, right? So we have a big defense ecosystem, we have national security research, we have all these things, and they're putting action into what the vision behind, they're putting action behind the vision. So I think that's really the key, that's the secret sauce. And listen, 90,000 square foot building in less than 2 years, that's purposely built for defense, national security research. I'm like, that's unheard of, especially on the federal scale, right? So we hope that we continue to build the ecosystem with the attitude of the patriotism and the great attitude of Texans, and our state legislator backing us up, and our university leadership backing us up, and industry following in suit. It makes it a great ecosystem for all of us to kind of get back to overmatch in some areas. Honestly, this is about deterrence. I have twins that are in the Corps of Cadets at Texas A&M, and I hope they never have to go to combat. But if they do, I want it to be an unfair fight for all our sons and daughters, right? Unfair towards their adversary. So,
absolutely. You talk a lot about national security in the book. I mean, give us some other examples of where, it's important.
Well, look, I mean, one of the things that's most interesting is that you probably know I was a Peace Corps volunteer, and one of the really interesting facts of U.S. foreign policy is that we have always built infrastructure all over the world. We no longer do that anymore, right? Because we're not the leaders in so many areas, and we've got to regain that lead. Everywhere you go, people want to work with us. They want us to come and build things, and build things the way we build them. So sort of the ethics are important. The focus on citizens, the focus on utility is important. The focus on long lastingness is absolutely important. And when you lose that, you create a significant level of vulnerability. Anybody who gets elected anywhere in the world, the number one thing they promise is infrastructure, and we need to be able to deliver that infrastructure to participate. We're not participating. China is. They're building projects with their Belt and Road initiative all over the world. 200 power plants in Brazil. Think about that. They own the Panama Canal. Both ends of the Panama Canal are owned by Chinese firms. You can't have a safe world. You can't have a world where deterrence isn't the first line of defense unless you have a really strong infrastructure economy, a global leading infrastructure economy. We don't have that, and I just, going back to the topic here, Look, I've been traveling all over the U.S. since I was allowed to travel, and everywhere I go, there's a little bit of hesitation, except in Texas. In Texas, you guys are blowing and going, as they say, and it's amazing the initiatives that you guys are putting forward. Everything, Sean was just talking about blue and green hydrogen. You come to Texas and everybody's talking about repurposing natural gas pipelines, using hydrogen ports, both Houston and Corpus Christi, to export hydrogen. It's extraordinary what you guys are doing in terms of the energy transition, and that needs to be shared, and that needs to motivate, that needs to drive momentum all over the U.S. And it's the momentum thing that's absolutely critical, because that attracts people to what we're doing. That puts people into universities, that makes them want to be engineering leaders and infrastructure leaders.
Well, and I remember when you were talking about the experience with the command first moving here. The collaboration around the state of Texas was just something that really accelerated the success of the command.
I think, at that time I was working for the Secretary of the Army, who selected Austin as the final as the location. It was really, the message was clear. It was, what can Texas do for the Army? And you have a message like that instead of what can X city do for the Army or whatever. And the regional approach with Dallas Fort Worth and the universities here, the Houston College Station area, and then San Antonio and Austin, that worked for us at that time, and it continues to blossom, it continues to grow, and I just think it's a win-win for everyone if we continue to work on some areas where we need overmatch, right? Because to Norman's point, you could only modernize a 1.2 million person Army probably once every 40 years because it's too costly to do anything otherwise. So we got to get it right. We got to get it done quickly. And getting it from the lab to the user is kind of our remit. How do we get it from the lab to the user without this long bureaucratic acquisition process?
It's all research.
That's right.
But we have this new infrastructure bill, and Sean talked about how the ports and our state will benefit from that. I mean, how do we take advantage of that?
Look, I think the way you want to think about this is a little bit differently, because Ed, we've got $30 trillion in debt as a country. 84% of our infrastructure is ring-fenced from private investment. It's fine that people want to spend a lot of money in terms of debt and in terms of new taxes on infrastructure. We have huge opportunities to develop projects based on long-term private investment as well. My guess is that about half of the money that we're talking about appropriating can come from the private sector, and I think it's absolutely critical. We've designed a highway in Ohio, $1 billion highway with 7 different revenue sources. A lot of digital revenue is going to be driven off of that highway project. These are digital ecosystems. That's the way to think about it. It's just wrong to think about this. You think about the connected battlefield. I mean, that's the way we need to think about our productive ecosystem. You're talking about, you talked about advanced manufacturing, but you're talking about advanced agriculture and advanced logistics. For me, a guy like me, the border area could easily be 100 kilometers both sides, a well-developed, linked ecosystem that specializes in bringing jobs back from the Far East, generating advanced manufacturing and advanced agriculture in a really interesting, world-leading way, employing people, solving problems, not defining problems.
Well, it's interesting you started out the book talking about what the future would look like with all of this automation, and hopefully we'll see it with some of the work that's happening out. I mean, you guys are getting involved in robotics, autonomous vehicles, not only for defense, but just in general.
That's right. Air, ground, ground, air. We're looking at resilient networks. How do you work in a degraded or challenged network? I mean, these are all things that are kind of futuristic. This is the way the future of battlefield is going to look like. To Norman's point, everything's going to be connected.
All right, so Norm, we have an idea. A bunch of us from YTexas and from this summit, we want to put together like a private coalition of business owners, executives, to work on this collaboration on infrastructure. What do you think? Good idea?
I think it's a tremendous idea. I think it's what's missing. And this idea, somebody has to lead the process, right? And that's not what's happening right now. So if you guys could get up in the morning and lead the process, I think the whole country would follow. I think you have a moral obligation to push forward with this idea.
That's right.
Moral obligation.
All right. So, Colonel Guieb, we have one proposition for him. He's got to move to Texas.
Yeah.
It's not a bad
Wait,
idea.
we need you. You're across the street from the White House, so maybe you need to stay there.
Well, I can live in both places. All right, but you've got vision here and you've got momentum here.
Yeah.
So you got a tremendous team.
Yeah.
You got foreign policy. You've got domestic policy, driving national security. I think we have something here. And then you guys are going to finance it with the coalition you're going to put together.
Get the line of credit going.
Yeah, we're moving in the right direction.
Well, look, I appreciate both of you making the trip into Dallas-Fort Worth.
Thank you.
Excellent book. You need to get it, and it'll be available on our website. We'll throw it on our website wherever you can get books.